Anything else? So we'll move to warrant Article 4. Should Article 3 be adopted, shall the Alton School District raise and appropriate the sum of $1,750,000 to add to geothermal heating and cooling to the Alton Central School, including equipment installation, professional service fees, site development fees, and any other items incidental to or necessary for the said heating and cooling system, to authorize the issuance of not more than $1,750,000 of bonds and notes in accordance with the provision of the Municipal Finance Act, and authorize the school board to issue and negotiate such bonds on notes and to determine the rate of interest thereon, and further to raise and appropriate an additional sum of $39,861.11 for the first year's interest payment on the bond. This article is contingent upon the approval of Article 3. And the Budget Committee did not approve this one.
Question to Mr. Krause.
Yep.
Do you have that information I requested yesterday?
And public input.
Not really public.
Yeah.
I can pass it down this way. Let's go down the
Just to break down what they are.
Figure this out.
Just keep one.
I was just going to separate them, so you just keep passing.
You like that? Thank you very much.
Send us?
Requested that I run you a spreadsheet of potential payback for the expenditure of the geothermal heat, and unfortunately, these huge amounts of numbers here are those paybacks. Just to give you a little bit of explanation, Mr. Miller asked me to give I guess, the best guess scenario, because realize this is a crystal ball type prediction. But I went and researched the price of heating oil from 2005 to 2011, and that's published with the state, has some average that they published for the state of New Hampshire, and it increased 62%, which is 10% a year. I used 9% to be a little bit conservative, and a 3% increase on electric rates. I have no basis for the 3% increase on electric rates. I just figured that you should have something in there to increase your electric rates.
Excuse me, just a question on what you just said. Is this the best case, worst case, or most probable scenario? The one you're talking about right
This is
now?
the most probable scenario.
Probable, not the best case, the most probable
Well, I
scenario.
guess I didn't run a best case. I ran what I thought was an
Sure.
accurate representation of where we're going to end up.
Thank you.
And you can play with this 100 times if you want to change it to 8% or whatever you think it
Sure.
should be. So the ground source heat pump, which is really the effect of a geothermal system, is comprised of about 50% cost of in-wells, and the wells obviously have no life to them. They're a closed-loop system. You don't draw off water off of them like you do with some residential systems, if you've heard of that. So basically, we look at the well portion of a geothermal system as forever. And there shouldn't be, save some natural disaster, anything that would affect the well portion. Then the next portion of that is a certain proportion of ductwork, which I don't have it broken out into pieces, and then pumps, and then some equipment. So the ground source heat pumps right now are known to save over 64% over oil, presently right now. I used 50%, just again to be conservative so that we're not taking it out to the outlet limit. What you see on these figures here over on the left-hand side is a present heating cost for a similar energy efficient regular oil heat school. Not your school now, because I think you're spending more than that. But in fairness, to make a fair comparison, we used a third of a gallon per square foot. Right now, you're probably headed towards a half a gallon per square foot or something in that range. So that the top line there is the existing high-efficient school. The next line down is the ground source heat pump. Again, 50% of the 126 gives you the $63,000 cost. and then your annual savings. I flat rated the cost of this over $127,000 over 20 years. I'm not an accountant. I just did it so we had a number we could look at from a comparison standpoint. You can see the net savings in the first year ends up being a negative number because it's a $127,000 bond cost. You're only saving $68,000. But you can also see that in year 5, that becomes a positive number. Underneath it, I just did a cumulative savings. I mean, we can run this any way you want it, but just to try to get that information out to people, that bottom level layer is the cumulative savings. You can see at year 15, it pays back the bond in its entirety. Whether or not you choose or the board chooses to prepay the bond is way beyond my expertise. But I thought what Mr. Miller was asking for is to just get some concept of what this stuff can do to save you in the long run. That's what the scenario there does. The next scenario, if you look down just below the cumulative savings, escalator at 5% and 3% for electricity. You go down to probably the most unlikely scenario, which is an escalator of 3% for the oil and an escalator of 1.5% for the electricity. I truly wish this would happen. I don't really think it's going to happen. But in a worst-case scenario, the positive comes in, positive cash flow, not a complete payoff, but a positive cash flow comes in at year 18, and then it pays off at year 22. I really think that's an unlikely scenario. And maybe it's an average of the top one and the bottom one, but I think it really illustrates that that product does work. And what I haven't taken out of here because of the length of paper that would be is to start looking at this cumulative savings over the next 50 years. It's stunning. It's really an investment up front, which unfortunately is expensive, but the payback is truly stunning to me in the long run. Anyone that's looking at lowering their operating costs, which usually is a very high piece of a budget, this is a very important thing to do to lower an operating cost.
What's the average life of the system?
Well, you know, I'm not sure that there's been around enough to tell you the average life of the system. There is compressors and there are pumps. There's a lot of piping. There's a lot of ductwork. And so obviously those components have a failure rate. I, in year 20, started throwing in $10,000 a year for whatever.
What does the salesman say? It should last forever? Should last 30 years?
There just isn't a number that I can give you that says in year 17. I mean, it could be that in year 14 you're going to have to put some money into it, and it might skip to year 23, you'll have to put some money into it. So I just threw in $10,000 a year at year 20 because that's a reasonable expectation for pumps and things like that.
Our electric bill will increase because of the pumps,
But
correct?
this factors electric costs. That's why we have the escalator of 3% for electric costs. So yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's an electrical-driven source of energy. Now, the good thing about that is
And
that...
the pumps run 24/7, correct? No, they don't?
They run when you need the heat out of the system,
Or when you need to cool it?
or when you need to cool it, which obviously is optional.
So it's pretty much, I mean, so the pumps will be running off and on year-round?
No, no, they wouldn't run year-round,
Well, you're either heating or cooling.
only if you choose to cool. Right. The cooling here
We're
really
cooling
is...
now, I'm thinking we're going to choose to cool.
Well, that goes back to a budget
Right.
process, I suppose, you know. And I can't really, all I can really address is the heat side of it. You have to heat, and the heat side of it's very accurate. I put in some money for cooling. Obviously, if you cool all summer, that number would go up. It is more efficient to cool that way. But I can't,
But then we're not going to see, it would take us beyond year 20 to see this pay for itself if we start cooling all summer, correct?
absolutely. But why would you cool all summer?
Because we do now. We have air conditioners in the school, correct? We just bought
You
a
don't-
half a dozen last
You
year.
don't cool the
New ones,
entire,
four
you
new
don't
ones
cool the
were
entire
purchased.
school, I don't think. You
Yeah,
have
'cause this'll-
isolated places in the school.
This will be on a zone, so you
That's
can...
right, that's
you
right.
can
I mean,
select
you'll
where-
have various zones
To
of
you,
what
if
you
it's
can...
there, it's going to get used. I really,
Right.
I feel that way.
What's the
There wouldn't be a difference from the air conditioners.
In your
that are there.
professional estimation, what's the big rat's nest? What's your worst fear that could happen? For instance, things have happened up at the high school that nobody expected. Okay, after a few years, what can blow, and are we indemnified under warranty if they do blow?
Your compressors typically end up with a 5 to 10-year warranty. We can increase that number, but you pay for it. I mean, it's like an extended warranty. So, I mean, you usually would stick in the 5 to 10-year range and expect that you're getting a good enough quality in that range attached to it that you're going to go out further than that. Some of the problems we had in the high school were really unrelated to geothermal. They were, found asbestos issues and found structural issues that had to be corrected. So they were really very unrelated to this one piece of the deal.
And you would expect that, from what you said, that any significant costs wouldn't hit before year 14 or year 18?
Well, it's a crystal ball. I'll be very
Okay.
honest with you. It could happen in year 10. It isn't supposed to happen in year 10. I mean,
What's a compressor go for?
they're smaller compressors, so I don't know the price
Okay.
off the top of my head. So it's
Okay.
not like you're working with 3 units in the whole school.
Okay.
You're working with multiple units, so their fractional cost, is thousands of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars.
This has been very helpful. I appreciate your
Well,
work.
and I would have brought this before if we had requested it. I'm sorry I missed your other meeting, but I did have a previous commitment, and if I bagged off on them, they wouldn't have been happy either. So I apologize I couldn't make it, but sometimes it is conflict for me.
And these numbers accurately reflect the outcome of geothermal in New Hampshire in this particular zone,
Correct.
correct?
And realize I've used 50% when they're telling me we can now do 70%.
Okay.
So I've got a
64%.
fudge factor in that, and I've used 9% for the oil increase when the last 5 or 6 years it's been 10%. So there's a couple of safety factors that built into that also.
Thank you.
Impressive.
Thank you.
Before you go, can I just ask a question? Okay, presently, we use room air conditioners.
Pardon me?
Presently, we use room air conditioners in, I think, I don't know how many of our rooms, some of our rooms. If we were to replace those with the AC available through geothermal, do we save money?
You definitely save money, and I did factor in $10,000 of usage of room air conditioners right now for a savings of $5,000. And it is a very important note that Mrs. Howard's made, that the more you use it, the more it's going to cost.
Right.
It's a very optional. The air conditioning comes because it's very much like a refrigerator. You turn it the other direction, you get the cooling out of it. So it's there, not necessarily to be abused, but it's there. We're not paying extra to put an element in to get AC out of it. It's there because of the nature of the system. But it does cost electricity to run.
Thank you.